My wife told me, I need to explore relationships with women. You should support my journey. So I supported her and started dating her sister. When she saw our wedding, her reaction was priceless. My name is Andres. I am 35 years old, and I have been working as an automotive mechanic here in Tucson for the last 12 years, building my reputation one honest repair at a time. You know how it is. Monica and I had been married for a solid 4 years, living in this decent middle-class neighborhood near my shop. Nothing fancy, but comfortable enough that we could save money each month and talk about maybe getting a bigger place eventually. She worked as a physical therapist at one of those clinics that always smelled like disinfectant and had motivational posters everywhere, and she was genuinely good at her job. Patients loved her because she had this way of making you feel like your recovery really mattered to her personally. For a long time, our routine was predictable in the best possible way. I would come home covered in grease and engine oil. She would already be there making dinner or catching up on clinic paperwork, and we would spend our evenings talking about our days, watching whatever was on Netflix, planning weekend trips to Phoenix, or maybe down to Mexico to visit her family. We had Sunday dinners every couple of weeks with Monica's sister, Paula, who worked as a nurse at the University Medical Center and had recently gone through a tough divorce from her husband of 6 years. Those family gatherings were always comfortable and full of laughter, with Paula bringing her famous tres leches cake and sharing hospital stories that made us grateful for our relatively drama-free lives. But then, about 6 months ago, Monica started attending these wellness workshops on Thursday nights, something about mindfulness and self-discovery that she had heard about through a coworker. And at first, I thought it was great because she would come home energized and talking about meditation techniques and how important it was to live authentically, whatever that meant. I supported it completely because honestly, if yoga mats and breathing exercises made her happy, then I was all for it, right? The workshops were being led by this woman named Jessica, who was maybe 29 and called herself a wellness coach, which seemed like one of those job titles that did not exist when we were kids, but somehow made perfect sense in today's world. Monica would come home with these little nuggets of wisdom that Jessica had shared. Things like, you cannot love others until you truly love yourself, and society conditions us to suppress our authentic desires. And I would nod along because it all sounded reasonable enough, even if it sometimes felt a bit like fortune cookie philosophy. But then the Thursday workshops turned into Thursday workshops plus Saturday morning sessions. And then suddenly Monica was texting Jessica throughout the week about breakthrough moments and personal growth insights that apparently could not wait until their next scheduled meeting. I started to notice that Monica would get this distant look in her eyes when she talked about Jessica's teachings, as if she were processing some profound revelation that the rest of us mere mortals would not understand. And she started using phrases like expanding my consciousness and freeing myself from limiting beliefs in casual conversations about things like what to have for breakfast. Even Paula mentioned during one of our family dinners that Monica seemed different lately, more distracted and less present during their sisterly conversations. But we both just thought it was a phase that would pass once the novelty wore off. The real turning point came on a Tuesday night in March, right after we had finished eating the chicken enchiladas that Monica had perfected over the years of our marriage. We were sitting at our kitchen table, the same table where we had planned our wedding, discussed buying our first house, and shared thousands of ordinary meals that somehow felt extraordinary because we were sharing them together. She looked at me with this serious expression I had never seen before, took a deep breath, and said, "Andres, I need to tell you something important about my journey of self-discovery, and I need you to really listen with an open heart." I put down my fork, thinking maybe she wanted to change careers or had decided to go back to school for some advanced certification. But then she continued, "I have been awakening to my authentic self through these workshops with Jessica, and I have realized that I need to explore emotional connections with women to fully understand who I truly am as a person." The words hit me like a wrench to the gut, not because I had anything against people exploring their identity, but because of the way she said it, as if this were some inevitable conclusion that any reasonable person would understand and immediately support. She kept talking, explaining how Jessica had helped her recognize that she had been suppressing a fundamental part of her nature and how emotional and spiritual connections with women operate on a completely different level than relationships with men, so it would not threaten our marriage in the way a traditional affair might. I just sat there trying to process what I was hearing as Monica continued her explanation, telling me that this was not about any specific person, just personal growth and authenticity. Although she did mention that Jessica had been incredibly supportive and understanding throughout this discovery process and had offered to help guide her through exploring these feelings in a healthy and conscious way. When I finally found my voice and asked what this exploration would look like in practical terms, Monica smiled as if I had asked exactly the right question and explained that she needed the freedom to develop close, intimate friendships with women without me feeling threatened or possessive. Because evolved partnerships support each other's growth, even when it challenges societal norms. She made it sound so reasonable, so progressive and enlightened, that questioning it would brand me as some kind of backward, insecure caveman who could not handle his wife's spiritual evolution. What happened next still makes me question every decision I made during those months. But hindsight has this cruel way of making everything obvious when it is already too late. I ended up agreeing to Monica's exploration plan, not because I was genuinely okay with it, but because she had positioned the conversation in such a way that saying no would have made me look like some kind of controlling, emotionally stunted husband who could not handle his wife's personal growth. And honestly, that manipulation worked perfectly because I had spent our entire marriage trying to be the supportive partner who would not hold her back from anything she wanted to achieve. The very next weekend, Monica announced that she and Jessica were planning a spiritual retreat to Sedona, just the two of them, to deepen their connection in a sacred space, away from everyday distractions. And when I asked if this was what she meant by exploration, she gave me this patient smile, as if I were slowly catching on to something obvious. From that point on, our normal life basically ceased to exist as I had known it for 4 years. Monica started spending every Thursday night with Jessica, then Thursdays and Saturdays, then entire weekends would disappear into these growth experiences that apparently required hours of uninterrupted time together to properly process. She would come home from these sessions glowing with this energy she had never shown with me, talking about how Jessica understood parts of her that had been locked away for decades and how their connection was healing wounds that conventional relationships could not reach. I found myself eating dinner alone most nights, doing all the household maintenance myself, and basically keeping our entire domestic life running while Monica explored her authentic self with someone who seemed to have unlimited free time for intensive spiritual conversations. The worst part was not even the loneliness. It was the way Monica would share details about her journey that felt way too intimate for a casual conversation, telling me how Jessica had helped her unlock emotional barriers through deep breathing exercises and guided meditation that lasted for hours at Jessica's apartment. She would describe these breakthrough moments where she felt completely seen and understood in ways that made it clear I was being compared to some kind of emotional standard that I had apparently never met, despite 4 years of what I thought was a pretty solid marriage. Then came the social media posts. Monica, who had never been particularly active online, suddenly started sharing these cryptic quotes about living your truth and embracing all forms of love, with photos of sunsets and inspirational landscapes that were clearly not taken in Tucson. She would post pictures from restaurants I had never been to, hiking trails I had never heard of, and weekend getaways that she had apparently planned without mentioning them to me until after the fact, always with captions about being grateful for the people who see your soul and celebrating authentic connections. Meanwhile, I was working 50-hour weeks at the shop trying to keep our finances stable, while Monica's exploration seemed to require an endless budget for wellness retreats, special workshops, and fine dining experiences that were apparently crucial for her spiritual development. It was during this period that Paula started visiting our house more frequently, ostensibly to check on her sister, but increasingly to check on me. She would stop by on weekends when Monica was on her retreats, bringing groceries, offering to help with the household chores that had clearly been neglected. Paula had this direct way of addressing problems that was refreshing after months of Monica's spiritual vocabulary. When she noticed that our fridge was basically empty or that bills were piling up on the kitchen counter, she would ask practical questions about how I was managing everything alone and offer concrete help instead of philosophical insights about personal growth. During one of these visits, she mentioned that Monica had been canceling their traditional sister lunches and seemed distracted during phone conversations, always eager to end the calls when Jessica texted or called her. Paula had worked in healthcare long enough to recognize when someone was going through dramatic personality changes and was clearly concerned about her sister's behavior, but she did not want to overstep by confronting Monica directly. Instead, she started spending more time at our house, initially to support both of us through what she assumed was a temporary phase, but gradually focusing more attention on me as it became obvious that I was the one who was really struggling with the situation. We would end up talking for hours, drinking coffee in my kitchen, discussing everything from practical concerns about maintaining a household to deeper questions about what authentic relationships really look like when both people are genuinely committed to each other's well-being. Paula had this way of listening that made me realize how long it had been since anyone had paid attention to my thoughts and feelings without trying to analyze them through some spiritual framework or relate them back to expanding consciousness. She would ask about my work at the shop, my plans for the business, my worries about the future, and seemed genuinely interested in my answers instead of just waiting for her turn to share insights about personal growth and authentic living. More importantly, she noticed things about my daily life that Monica had apparently stopped seeing. She would comment on how tired I looked, suggest that I needed to take better care of myself, or simply acknowledge that managing everything alone was exhausting and unfair, no matter what spiritual journey was supposed to justify it. Her visits became the highlight of my week, not because anything inappropriate was happening, but because they were the only times I felt like a real person with legitimate needs and concerns, instead of some kind of obstacle to someone else's spiritual evolution. What unfolded over the next few months was like watching two completely different approaches to human connection play out side by side, and the contrast became impossible to ignore. Paula's visits naturally evolved from friendly concern into something deeper and more meaningful. Although neither of us planned it or even acknowledged what was happening until we were already there, we would spend Saturday afternoons working on household projects that Monica had abandoned, talking about everything from childhood memories to career goals, and I realized I was laughing more during those few hours than I had in the previous several weeks combined. Unlike the intense, consciousness-expanding sessions that Monica described with Jessica, my relationship with Paula developed through shared experiences and mutual respect. We discovered that we both loved old movies from the 70s. We had similar views on financial responsibility and family loyalty. And we shared this dry sense of humor about the absurdities of modern life that made even routine conversations feel refreshing. When Paula mentioned she was struggling to move some furniture into her new apartment after her divorce, I offered to help one Sunday when Monica was attending another of her weekend retreats with Jessica, and that afternoon turned into one of the most relaxed and enjoyable days I had had in months. We ordered pizza. We talked about her plans for starting over after her divorce, and I found myself opening up about my own worries and frustrations in ways that felt natural instead of like some kind of therapy session. Paula had this way of making even difficult conversations feel manageable, not through spiritual rhetoric or consciousness-raising exercises, but simply through her genuine presence and attention to the people around her. When she thanked me for helping with the move, she looked at me directly and said, "I really appreciate having someone I can count on through all this chaos." And I felt valued in a way that had nothing to do with supporting someone else's spiritual journey or personal growth. Our friendship gradually evolved into something deeper over the course of several weeks, and the transformation happened so naturally that we both recognized it at the same time. One evening, after we had spent the day together while Monica was at another intensive workshop with Jessica, we were sitting in my backyard talking about our respective situations when there was this moment where we both realized that our connection had become something that neither of us had planned but both of us wanted. The shift was honest and mutual, without any manipulation or spiritual justification. We were simply two people who enjoyed each other's company and had developed genuine feelings through shared experiences and authentic conversation, which felt revolutionary after months of navigating Monica's performative exploration of her authentic self. Meanwhile, Monica was becoming increasingly absorbed in her journey with Jessica, spending multiple nights a week at Jessica's apartment for what she described as intensive healing work that required complete privacy and uninterrupted focus. She would come home at odd hours, sometimes not until the next morning, with explanations about breakthrough sessions that had run longer than expected and could not be interrupted once they had begun. But something interesting started to happen around this time. As my emotional investment in Paula grew stronger, I found myself caring less and less about Monica's whereabouts and activities, which apparently did not go unnoticed by my wife, who was used to having my complete attention and concern available whenever she needed reassurance about her spiritual progress. For the first time since this whole exploration had begun, I was not asking anxious questions about her plans with Jessica. I was not waiting up when she stayed out late, and I was not providing the emotional support and validation that she had apparently come to expect as her right while she pursued connections with someone else. Monica started making comments about how I seemed distant and less engaged with her growth process. And when I responded that I was simply giving her the space she had requested to explore her authentic self, she looked genuinely confused, as if the possibility that I might develop my own interests and relationships had never occurred to her. The situation came to a boiling point when Monica returned home early from what was supposed to be a 3-day retreat with Jessica and found me preparing dinner for 2 people, with candles on the table and a bottle of wine that was clearly not just for my own consumption. When she demanded to know what was going on, I calmly explained that I was having dinner with someone important to me, and when she pressed for more details, I told her that I had been spending time with Paula and that our relationship had developed into something significant and important. The explosion that followed was immediate and volcanic. Monica accused me of cheating, of betraying our marriage, of undermining her spiritual growth by replacing her with someone else. And when I pointed out that I was simply following the same principles of exploration and authentic connection that she had been promoting for months, she screamed, "That is completely different, Andres. What I am doing with Jessica is spiritual growth, but you are just having a regular affair." The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. But the real shock came when I mentioned that I had been seeing her sister, and Monica's face went completely white. She stared at me for maybe 10 seconds in total silence before asking if I was serious. And when I confirmed that yes, Paula and I had developed genuine feelings for each other over the last few months, Monica's spiritual philosophy seemed to collapse in real time. "My sister," she whispered, and suddenly all the talk about evolved partnerships and conscious love disappeared, replaced by raw fury about family loyalty and personal betrayal, which had nothing to do with spiritual growth or authentic self-discovery. The final chapter of this disaster was more dramatic and satisfying than I ever could have imagined it would be, although it came with complications I had not anticipated. The confrontation in our kitchen escalated quickly as Monica processed the full reality of what I had told her. Not only was I seeing someone else, but that someone was her own sister. The person who had been coming to our house for months under the guise of family support, while apparently developing feelings for her brother-in-law. She started demanding details about how long this betrayal had been going on, whether Paula had planned this from the beginning, and how we could have conspired against her while she was focused on her spiritual growth and personal development. When I explained that my relationship with Paula had developed naturally over several months through genuine friendship and mutual support during a difficult time, Monica's response was immediate and predictable. I had to end it immediately, cut off all contact with Paula, and refocus on supporting Monica's authentic journey with Jessica. She stood there in our kitchen, hands on her hips, explaining with complete seriousness that my involvement with another woman posed a fundamental threat to our marriage in ways that her spiritual exploration with Jessica simply did not, because traditional heterosexual relationships operate within possessive patriarchal frameworks, while her connection with Jessica was transcending societal limitations through conscious love. The conversation became surreal when Monica started laying out ground rules for ending my relationship with Paula. I was supposed to explain to her sister that I had made a mistake and needed to focus on my marriage. I could not have any more private conversations with Paula, and I definitely could not see her outside of necessary family gatherings where Monica would be present to supervise our interactions. When I asked Monica if she planned to apply the same restrictions to her relationship with Jessica, she looked at me as if I had suggested something completely unreasonable and explained that her spiritual growth could not be limited by conventional relationship boundaries because it existed on a higher plane than ordinary romantic attachments. I let her finish her entire speech about conscious love and spiritual evolution. I nodded thoughtfully, and then I said something I had been gathering the courage to say for months. "Monica, You are absolutely right that our marriage cannot survive this situation, so I think we should get a divorce." The silence that followed was like the moment after a car crash, when your brain is still processing what just happened. She stared at me for maybe 20 seconds before asking if I was serious. And when I confirmed that I was completely serious and would be contacting a lawyer the next day, her entire spiritual philosophy seemed to collapse in real time. Suddenly, all the talk about evolved partnerships and conscious love disappeared, replaced by panic about practical concerns like where she would live, how she would afford her own place, and whether Jessica was really prepared to provide the kind of emotional and financial support that Monica had been taking for granted in our marriage. I filed for divorce 3 days later, and the process moved faster than either of us had expected because we did not have kids and our assets were relatively straightforward to divide. Monica kept trying to negotiate some kind of reconciliation where I would give her time to complete her spiritual journey with Jessica while maintaining our marriage as a foundation of stability, but I had moved beyond that kind of thinking completely. The most devastating development for Monica happened within the family, where Paula had apparently been sharing details about her sister's behavior and its impact on our marriage with their parents and extended relatives. When word got out that Monica's spiritual exploration had contributed to the end of her marriage and that she had opposed her sister developing a relationship with a man who had been abandoned and neglected for months, the family consensus was overwhelmingly supportive of Paula and critical of Monica's selfishness. Meanwhile, Jessica's commitment to Monica's spiritual journey turned out to be significantly less permanent than advertised. Within 6 weeks of my divorce filing, Jessica had apparently identified another spiritual seeker who needed guidance in exploring authentic connections, and Monica suddenly found herself without both a husband and a consciousness-expanding mentor to help navigate her authentic self-discovery. Paula and I took our time developing our relationship without the pressure of hidden circumstances or competing spiritual obligations. We spent weekends exploring hiking trails around Tucson. We discovered that we both loved cooking together more than eating out, and we built the kind of partnership where supporting each other's goals felt natural instead of like some kind of evolved relationship philosophy that required constant explanation and justification. Months after my divorce was finalized, I proposed to Paula during a weekend camping trip to the Catalina Mountains, and she said yes without needing to consult any wellness coaches or spiritual advisors about whether accepting represented authentic growth or societal conditioning. We planned a small wedding for the following spring, inviting close family and friends who had supported us through this transition. Roberto, my business partner, offered to host the reception at his ranch outside of town, and we kept everything simple and focused on celebrating our commitment instead of making some kind of statement about conscious love or evolved partnerships. The wedding day itself was perfect until about 30 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, when Monica showed up at the entrance wearing what looked like some kind of flowing spiritual attire and demanding to speak with both of us about the damage this was doing to our family. Apparently, she had seen our engagement announcement on social media and had spent weeks trying to decide whether to attend, finally convincing herself that she had some kind of duty to prevent us from destroying family bonds through what she called a relationship built on betrayal and manipulation. Paula handled the situation with more grace than Monica deserved, calmly explaining that this was a private event and Monica needed to leave immediately. But Monica launched into this bizarre speech about how our marriage represented a fundamental violation of family loyalty and how we were using spiritual concepts to justify hurting the people who loved us most. The entire wedding party, including several family members who knew the whole story, watched in amazement as Monica lectured us about family loyalty and emotional manipulation, while seemingly oblivious to the irony that she had spent months abandoning her marriage for spiritual exploration and was now opposing her sister finding happiness with a man who actually wanted commitment. Roberto's brother, who works in event security around Tucson, escorted Monica off the property while she was yelling something about how conventional relationships were destroying authentic spiritual growth and how we had stolen her chance at family happiness. The whole scene was so absurd that our wedding guests spent the rest of the reception sharing stories about the most entitled behavior they had ever witnessed, with Monica's performance becoming the unanimous winner by a substantial margin. 6 months later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Monica was working with another spiritual advisor, this time a man who specialized in healing family trauma through forgiveness and conscious communication. And apparently, she was convinced that our marriage had been the result of family manipulation instead of genuine love and mutual respect. But honestly, by that point, Paula and I were too busy building our own life together to spend much time analyzing Monica's ongoing journey to authentic consciousness. And I realized that the best response to manipulation and spiritual pretense is to simply refuse to participate in the drama and build something genuine with someone who does not need elaborate philosophical frameworks to justify treating you and your family with basic respect and consideration.